Corporal Thomas Miller pressed his back against the hedgerow and listened to the sound that was about to get him killed. Ping! The metallic ring echoed through the French countryside, the distinctive sound of an M1 Garand's empty clip ejecting into the air. Except Miller's rifle wasn't empty. 30 yards away in the hedgerow across the field, a German Fallschirmjäger heard that ping and smiled. He'd been hunting Americans for 3 weeks. He knew that sound like he knew his mother's voice. It meant the American was defenseless. 8 rounds gone, 4 seconds to reload, a lifetime in combat. The German rose from cover, MP-40 raised, already moving toward the helpless American. "Ich hab dich," he muttered. "I have you." He was wrong. Miller watched the German paratrooper charge across the open ground. 20 yards, 15, 10. The German was fast, confident, certain that he was about to kill a man fumbling with an empty rifle. At 5 yards, Miller raised his Garand. The German's eyes went wide. He saw the magazine, fully loaded, 8 rounds ready to fire. He tried to stop, tried to raise his weapon, tried to understand how he'd heard an empty rifle that wasn't empty. Miller squeezed the trigger. The German never got his answer. "But you're about to. Let me tell you about the most famous sound in World War II. The M1 Garand was revolutionary. The first semi-automatic rifle adopted as the standard infantry weapon by any major military. 8 rounds as fast as you could pull the trigger. No bolt manipulation, no manual cycling. General George Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised." He wasn't exaggerating. The Garand gave American soldiers a massive firepower advantage over enemies armed with bolt-action rifles. While a German with a Kar 98K was working his bolt, an American could put 3 more rounds downrange. But the Garand had a problem. The rifle used an en-bloc clip system. 8 rounds were loaded together in a metal clip that inserted directly into the rifle's action. When the last round was fired, the clip ejected automatically, propelled upward by a spring-loaded mechanism. And when that empty clip ejected, it made a sound, ping, a sharp, distinctive metallic ring that carried across a battlefield. At first, this seemed like a minor quirk, an interesting bit of mechanical engineering, something soldiers might joke about. Then the killing started. German and Japanese soldiers quickly learned what that sound meant. It meant the American was empty. It meant he had no bullets left. It meant there was a window, maybe 4 seconds, maybe 5, where he was completely vulnerable. They started listening for it. Veterans taught rookies. "Hear the ping? That's your moment. Charge." It became a Pavlovian response. The ping was a dinner bell, and the American was the meal. Soldiers who had survived dozens of firefights died because a little piece of metal made a sound at the wrong moment. The greatest rifle ever designed had a fatal flaw, and American soldiers were dying because of it. The military brass knew about the ping problem. Engineers studied solutions. Officers wrote reports. But the soldiers in the field didn't wait for official answers. They did what soldiers have always done when their equipment tries to kill them. They improvised. And the solution they found was so simple, so devious, and so deadly that it turned the Garand's greatest weakness into a weapon. The concept was beautiful in its simplicity. If the enemy had learned to charge when they heard the ping, then the ping could be used as bait. All you needed was an empty clip and the willingness to lie. Soldiers started scavenging spent clips from the battlefield. They'd pick them up, clean them off, and tuck them into their pockets. Not for reloading, for deception. When a soldier was pinned down, facing an enemy who was waiting for his rifle to go empty, he could throw an empty clip against a rock or his helmet. Ping. The same sound, the same metallic ring, the same dinner bell, but the rifle was still fully loaded. The enemy would hear the ping and charge, just like they'd been trained, just like they'd done 100 times before, and they'd run straight into 8 rounds of 30-06. The trap was psychological warfare at its most basic. The enemy had created a pattern. Ping means charge. The Americans used that pattern against them. The first time a German soldier charged a defenseless American and found himself staring down a loaded barrel, the shock was absolute. His training had betrayed him. His instincts had lied. Word spread through German units. The Americans are faking the ping. Don't trust the sound. But by then the damage was done. The ping had become unreliable. Some were real. some were fake. German soldiers no longer knew which was which. Now they had two choices: charge and risk a trap, or wait and lose the advantage. Either way, the American soldier had bought himself time. The ping that was supposed to get him killed was now keeping him alive. Thomas Miller was a farm boy from Kansas who'd never left his home state before the army shipped him to England. He was 20 years old, skinny as a fence post, and absolutely terrified of the Bocage. The Bocage was the hedgerow country of Normandy, ancient earthen walls topped with dense vegetation, dividing the countryside into a maze of small fields. Perfect defensive terrain, a nightmare for attackers. Every hedgerow could hide a machine gun. Every field could be a kill zone. The Germans had fortified the Bocage for years, and they knew every sight line, every approach, every killing ground. Miller's unit had been fighting through this maze for 3 weeks. They'd lost more men to the hedgerows than to the beaches on D-Day. The fighting was close, intimate. Sometimes you could hear the enemy breathing on the other side of the vegetation, and the Germans had learned to listen for the ping. Miller discovered this the hard way. During a firefight near St. Lo, Miller had emptied his Garand at a German position. The clip ejected with its characteristic ring. Instantly, 2 Germans rose from cover and charged. Miller barely got his rifle reloaded in time. He killed one. His squadmate got the other. But it was close. Too close. "They're hunting us by sound," Miller told his sergeant that night. "They know when we're empty." The sergeant nodded. He'd seen it too. "So don't be empty when they think you are." He handed Miller a fistful of spent clips. "Start collecting these. They're more valuable than bullets." Miller understood immediately. War isn't just about who has the better weapons or the bigger army. It's about who can think faster, adapt quicker, turn weakness into strength. The Germans had learned to exploit the ping. The Americans learned to exploit the Germans exploiting the ping. Layers within layers. Deception within deception. And somewhere in the hedgerows of Normandy, a farm boy from Kansas was about to prove that the simplest trap is often the deadliest. July 17, 1944. Miller's squad was advancing through a particularly dense section of Bocage when they walked into an ambush. German fire came from 3 directions simultaneously. The squad scattered, diving for whatever cover they could find. Miller ended up alone behind a section of hedgerow, separated from his unit by 40 yards of open ground. He could hear his squadmates returning fire, but he couldn't see them. What he could see was a German position maybe 30 yards ahead. A Fallschirmjäger, German paratrooper, that was dug in behind a fallen tree watching Miller's hedgerow with predatory patience. The German was good, experienced. He wasn't going to charge blindly. He was waiting for the ping. Miller assessed his situation. He had a full clip, 8 rounds. The German had an MP-40 submachine gun, 32 rounds of pure close-quarters murder. If Miller stood up to engage, the German would cut him down before he could fire twice. The MP-40 was faster at close range. If Miller tried to run, he'd be shot in the back. His only option was to bring the German to him. Miller reached into his pocket and pulled out a spent clip. The metal was cold against his fingers. It felt like hope. He raised the clip and threw it against a rock beside his position. Ping, the sound rang out across the field, clear and distinctive, the universal signal of an empty American rifle. Miller watched the German's reaction through a gap in the hedgerow. The Fallschirmjäger's head came up. His eyes narrowed. A smile crossed his face. The smile of a predator who's just seen his prey stumble. He rose from cover. Miller's heart was pounding so loud he was sure the German could hear it. Everything depended on the next few seconds. The German moved fast. Combat crouch, MP-40 at the ready, eating up the distance between them with practiced efficiency. 25 yards. 20. 15. Miller didn't move, didn't raise his rifle, didn't do anything that might reveal the trap. 10 yards. The German was almost on top of him now, close enough that Miller could see his insignia, close enough to see the confidence in his eyes. That confidence was about to become confusion. Miller stood up. The German's reaction was instant. He tried to raise his MP-40, tried to fire, tried to do anything to save himself. But Miller was already aiming, already squeezing the trigger, already putting rounds into the man who thought he was charging a defenseless target. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3. The German crumpled. Miller stood over the body, his Garand still smoking, his hands shaking. The ping had worked, the trap had closed, and the hunter had become the hunted. Miller killed 3 more Germans that day using the same trick. Word spread through his unit. Other soldiers started carrying spent clips. The ping trap became unofficial doctrine in the hedgerows. But here's what made the tactic so effective. It wasn't just about the kills. It was about the doubt. Once the Germans realized the Americans were faking pings, they couldn't trust the sound anymore. Every ping became a question. Is he really empty, or is this a trap? If they charged real pings, they got kills. If they charged fake pings, they got killed. The uncertainty was paralyzing. German soldiers started hesitating, waiting, second-guessing. Those extra seconds of hesitation gave American soldiers time to reload for real. The ping that had been a death sentence became a weapon. Not because it changed, the sound was exactly the same, but because the context had changed. The enemy could no longer trust their own experience. Miller survived the war. He went back to Kansas, raised a family, and rarely talked about what he'd done in France. But when asked about the Garand, he always said the same thing. Best rifle ever made. Even its mistakes were useful. Now I have to tell you something important. The ping trap is controversial. Some historians argue that the entire concept is a myth. They point out that in the chaos of combat, the ping would often be drowned out by other sounds. Gunfire, explosions, screaming. They argue that no enemy could reliably hear and react to such a subtle sound. They have a point. Modern acoustic testing shows that the ping is much quieter than movies and legends suggest. In a loud firefight, it might be nearly inaudible. But here's what the skeptics miss. The Bocage wasn't always a loud firefight. Sometimes it was quiet. 2 soldiers on opposite sides of a hedgerow, listening for any sound that might reveal the enemy's position. In those moments, the tense, silent moments between bursts of violence, the ping could absolutely be heard. And in those moments, it could absolutely be exploited. The truth, as with most things in war, is probably somewhere in the middle. Did every soldier use the ping trap? No. Did some soldiers figure it out and use it successfully? Almost certainly. Was it official doctrine? Never. Was it passed down as combat wisdom from veteran to rookie? Absolutely. The ping wasn't just a mechanical quirk. It was a sound that meant something. First to the enemy, then to the Americans who learned to weaponize it. Whether Miller's specific story happened exactly as described or whether it's a composite of many soldiers' experiences doesn't matter. What matters is the lesson. Every weakness can become a weapon. Every flaw can become a trap. All it takes is a soldier smart enough to see the opportunity. The M1 Garand served until 1957 when it was replaced by the M14. The M14 also used a detachable magazine. No more on-block clip, no more ping. But the lesson of the Garand lives on. Modern soldiers are taught to use deception as naturally as they use their weapons. Fake movements, decoy positions, psychological warfare. The ping trap was one of the first examples of infantry-level deception using equipment quirks. It showed that a weapon's limitations weren't just problems to be solved. They were opportunities to be exploited. Today, militaries spend billions on technology designed to deceive the enemy. Radar jammers, decoy drones, electronic warfare. But the principle is exactly the same as Thomas Miller throwing an empty clip against a rock in Normandy. Make the enemy think they know what's happening, then prove them wrong. The German paratrooper who charged Miller's position died believing he'd heard the truth. The ping had never lied to him before. Every time he'd heard that sound, the American had been empty. Every time he'd charged, he'd won. Until he didn't. That's the thing about patterns. They work until they don't. The enemy had learned to exploit the Garand's flaw. They'd turned it into a killing advantage. And then one farm boy from Kansas learned to exploit their exploitation. The ping was supposed to be a death sentence. Miller turned it into a dinner bell. But he wasn't the one being served. Sometimes the sound that should get you killed is the sound that saves your life. All you have to do is make your weapon lie. If this story of deception, adaptation, and turning weakness into strength gripped you, smash that subscribe button right now. This channel uncover the forgotten stories of World War II, the tricks soldiers invented, the myths that might be true and the moments that changed everything. Tap that bell icon so you never miss when I drop a new video. And I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you think the ping trap was real or just a legend? Share this with someone who loves military history.